Okay, so it should be recording now. I'm just gonna open up Adobe Illustrator. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Awesome, okay. I'm just gonna turn off my video in case there's any lag. Okay, so once you've created your base map, you'll have all the different layers of the different parts of the site. So this is a great kind of foundation to start making your diagrams from in terms of what you want to show. So for example, I'll show some of the ones I've done before. Just to reference them again. Can everyone see the diagrams? No? Okay. Just gonna reshare it quick, sorry. Okay, how about now? Yeah, okay, so I'm going to I'll just show briefly how to make, for example, a figure ground of the kind of built structure and form, and how to export that, your base layers. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to Illustrator. All right. Okay, so once you have your base map, what I suggest doing is opening up a separate file in Illustrator. So we're gonna go to New, and then it's gonna bring us back to that new document page where you can set up in terms of like the dimensions that you want for your artboard. So we're just gonna go type in diagrams for now. And what you can do is you can try and fit them all onto one artboard, the 11 by 17, or you can have multiple, but it's probably best to just keep them all in one page. So we're gonna do a tabloid side landscape, and then we'll have another blank page. So if we go back to our base map, what you can start doing, so depending on what kind of information you want to show in your diagrams, you can turn on and off the layers that you've created. So for example, if we want to do a context map where we just show the surrounding buildings on site or any kind of built structure, we'll turn off any kind of layer such as trees. So I'll just show you, I had these on prior to, but I've turned them all off. And then we'll turn off the cars too, because we don't need those. So just kind of add or subtract the kind of layers of information that you don't do and do not want. So for example, we want the rock in there. We also want the buildings in context. We can also keep the roads, and then as well seating. The bagels, these are also kind of more structural features on the site. Paving and ground cover, that would be part of a different layer. The bridge pathway could also count in that as well. And then there is the sidewalk as well, but for now we'll just keep these layers. So what you're gonna do is you can group all your information that you want, just so that it's easier to kind of play around with and move it to the other artboard. So you can copy and paste this directly into your other separate file. So here you can see it's created another layer with all the information that we wanted from the previous one, and then that way your existing site map isn't disturbed or manipulated. The only problem is that it does create one layer, so we kind of lost the layers. But for now, since we are diagramming, we only want what is the most like valuable information, I guess. So this way, since it's grouped, you can start to scale this down as well. So if we remember from before, if you go to the transform option and go to scale, you can choose the percentage of how big or small you want your new diagram. So for example, we can scale it down to 50%. That way it's smaller. And then that way, if we have other diagrams, we can fit them on this page. I'm just going to go back to the regular size so that you can see better. So if we wanted to do a figure ground of the buildings as well as some of the more structural features, a great tool to use on Illustrator is Live Paint. So what you can do is you can select all the line work that you want, and then you can go to Object, and it'll be down this kind of option of tools. So if you go to Make, it's just going to essentially kind of group everything together so that you can easily drop and add color. So as you can see, what this does is it just kind of creates the outline. And then if you press, I think it's Control or Command K. Oh, why is this not working? Sorry, guys. Yeah, so Command K. See how this kind of paint bucket shows up? That way you can easily put in color. So make sure that your fill is turned on as well. So to do a figure ground, we can start to, why is this not blocked? So it's showing up great, but essentially, yeah, you can start to fill the kind of different spaces to show what is structural versus what is the ground. So in figure ground, it works with negatives and positive space. So for example, you could fill this in. So then when you click on it, it shows the difference in space. So if you keep doing that, I'll just go back to my diagrams. If you can see here, can everyone see the diagram again before? Yeah, so that's for structural form. You can see how I don't have all the layers that I had on my previous drawings. It's just kind of only showing the buildings and things I want to kind of show a clear, concise information exactly. In terms of if you wanted to do a circulation diagram, so I'll just go back to Illustrator. I'm just going to get rid of all this. So when you're doing diagrams, you want to make sure that the information you're showing is very concise. So you don't want to have too much background, I guess, information on. So I'm just gonna go. Back to the beginning. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy or group this as well. Copy and paste this into my new format or my new file. So if you wanted to do a circulation diagram, you can use your pen tool. What I also like to do if you're adding any other information other than the baseline, make sure you always click a new layer. That way you have your kind of base outline and then any additional information is separate. So I'm just gonna lock that, make sure this layer is turned on. So let's call this circulation. So I'm just gonna zoom in. So to show kind of movement or any kind of pattern on site, you want to use dashed lines and also arrows to show direction. So you can use the curvature tool to show different patterns. So I'm just going to show you how to make a dashed line. So for example, if I draw this curve, if you go up to stroke, there'll be a different option. So as well as line weights, there'll also be the different caps to kind of show how like the edge, it's kind of hard to see the different edge of, if you can see my cursor, I'm just kind of circling where the line stops, but that just shows if it's a square edge, circular, or the different caps. But you can also do arrowheads. So for example, we'll do it on this side so you can see. So you can add an arrow to show direction. As well, this line, if you click the dashed line, it'll turn these anchor points that you created or the line into dashes on the screen. what you can do to play around with it. So right now it's set at 12, but if you wanted to make them smaller, you can just change directly in the options, the dashed line weight as well. You can also change the gap to see how to show different, how do I do this? Let's do 12. So here you can see it spreads it out a bit more. This you kind of play around with to make sure it looks appropriate to the drawing. You can also add another dash. So for, I believe on one of the different series of dashes can show different things. How do I describe this? I believe it's on, I think for just regular circulation. I don't know, Nadia, do you remember in terms of like the different dash strokes? There's one, if you do single line, then double.
Well, I was going to say people can look at the thicknesses to represent volume. So that's a good thing to do. So for example, heavier volumes perhaps on the edges of the sidewalk, right? That could be a thicker line stroke. So maybe if you just show where to go back and show the thicker line stroke, or you can even use color. So for example, red could represent like as a primary color, the heaviest kind of movement, and orange like the second level of movement, and yellow kind of the third level of less movement, right? So people can use that as long as you have some kind of legend at the bottom to kind of decode what these dashes mean. But you know, typically people use like the line thicknesses. So a normal kind of dash line with 2 arrows on the side, and kind of the thickness is the best thing to use to show movement.
So I'll just go back to my diagrams to show, for example, this is my circulation diagram. So here I just showed pedestrian pathways in circulation. Since I only had one kind of layer of information, I didn't include a legend, but I'll show, I believe Susan did a good one as well. There's also a lot of examples on CourseLink of different diagrams you can do in how you can show circulation. So I'll just show, oh no, she didn't. Sorry guys, I'll just go back. So yeah, make sure you do include a legend in terms of what kind of information you're showing.
Can you maybe just go and show how to change color and the thicknesses? I think
those
are the general concepts, right, behind it. And maybe one more, can you actually show a circle with dashes? Because that could be great nodes, areas of interest, right?
So for the arrows, if you want to change the thickness, if you go back to stroke, see how it gets bigger. The only thing, make sure that you play around with the scale so that the arrowhead doesn't change as well. And what you can also do, so if you're finding you're adding different thicknesses and you wanted, let's say I did another one, but let's say, let's just turn this off for now. Let's say I just created a line. So you can always do your lines first. And then if you click on the line that you've created and want to match it to what a similar stroke or dash line, you can click the eyedropper tool. And then here it'll make it exactly the same. And then just make sure you place the arrowheads according on where you want to show direction as well. But I don't know why it's making it so good. So yeah, the eyedropper tool is great if you're creating lines and then you want to go back to match the strokes and make sure each of them are kind of, I guess, grouped together. You can use that feature. And then also, if we wanted to do a circle that's dashed, so I'm just going to use the circle option, make a circle on my page. So it should just automatically do a full regular line. But if you go back to stroke, click dash lines, this will also create a circle. And this is great to show like different kind of feature different areas on your site that you want to highlight. For example, some of the seating areas or any kind of noise, circles are great to show kind of like radius. What you can also do for circles, So I'm just going to turn this back on. Let's say I put a fill. You can also change the opacity. So then that way, if you layer it over top of things, it kind of shows information underneath as well. And then to change the color, so for example, you can use color and play around with color to show different features or different, what you want to highlight, you can use color instead of lines, is what I wanted to say. So you can use the different colors here. So for example, red kind of shows more emphasis. So if, let's say there's different points on the map that are, I guess, are spaces where there'd be higher pedestrian traffic or more sound, you could use red, play around the circles to show these points. And I'll show on, for example, some of the.
Then maybe actually one more thing. Can you show like a zigzag line, like
Yeah,
zigzags, or like almost like rail lines to just kind of emphasize buffers. So zigzags, almost like zippers, I guess, could represent like buffer noise or like an edge condition that's different. It's more passive, right? So the dashed lines with the arrows show movement, but perhaps there may be an area between two different districts that you want to show. Or, you know, there could be an area that has northwest winds and you want to show perhaps areas where it's blocked by a certain screen. So the zigzags actually represent that.
Is just using the pen tool?
Yeah, just using the pen tool.
Okay,
like
I was like, I don't know if there's a feature, but yeah, so you can draw kind of more
lines. Yeah.
Right now it has a fill
filled.
on. Yeah, this is not working. There we go. So if you make sure it's just there's no fill to it, or else it's going to not work the way you want it to. Yeah, so just the fill. So if you hold down the shift, that way it only works on an angle and it kind of keeps it the same. But you can do zigzag lines. I was gonna show Susan also had some, because my maps that I use were more passive diagrams, so they kind of show what's already existing on the site. It's more representational in terms of just more formal spots, whereas like there's other examples you can use. For example, Susan did some, these are what are called more active diagrams. So they kind of combine different layers of information to convey something that isn't necessarily, I guess, present on site. So for example, shade analysis is a great option you can do. So this kind of combines the different vegetation information as well, kind of makes inferences. It's more of an analytical approach to diagramming. So here you can kind of see based on the vegetation on site, where shaded areas would be. And she used the opacity and the different coloring to show this really well. So you can still see the different parts of the site underneath, but then the opacity, since it's turned down, it's still visible. And then, for example, the dash line is also shown as well. And then she also did.
I have a bunch of examples that are placed on Course Link. There's people are asking this. It's already on Course Link. And there's also some actually connected on the assignment sheet itself. And you'll see some of them don't even have the base map. Like you don't have to repeat the base map because you've already done it. So you could, it's more like diagrams are more referential, like they're more representational. They're not, as mentioned, like to scale, because you know, the arrow itself doesn't have to have like a dimension to it. It's meant more as a representation and boundaries. So you could shut off like your base map at the end, and you know, on one sheet you could put 4 small ones, like 2 on the top and 2 at the bottom. You know, that's one way of doing them. But it's more like people are saying, can you show all 4? Well, we're asking you to do that. That's part of the kind of the critical thinking behind it. We want you to do the diagrams. We're showing a couple of tools. So the dashed lines with movements, the zigzags, the circles, all of these are kind of notations to help you kind of diagram specific elements of the park. You know, it could be like even you going on Google Earth and looking at the site, and seeing where people are congregated. And, you know, you can make an assumption, of course, along the sidewalks of the edges, that's utilized the most. And areas that have the seating elements, like the donuts along the wall, along where the trees are, or like the benches, those are where people would congregate and sit. So these are things that we're asking you to do, to diagram for us. So these are kind of very good examples that Abby is showing in terms of, you know, learning 2 or 3 techniques and repeating them in different ways will help you get a lot of diagrams. So so those are things. It's just more what you want to show. We're looking for that as a piece to assess. We won't tell you, we're giving you a lot right through the examples. And, you know, I think we're pretty much giving away the answers. So we want to make sure there is some level of creativity.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest as well for diagramming. Yeah, it's a lot of you develop your own methodology in terms of like what kind of information you find most interesting about the site. But I can also show, so how to turn off the like turn down your base layer as well. So once you create your, let's say you had circulation, we'll just do.
Yeah.
So if you have your base layer, so if you select all the line work, and then up here, there's going to be opacity. So another, with diagramming, like I said previously, you want to make sure it's very clean and concise so that it conveys the information quickly. So in that sense, you want to turn down any kind of additional information that isn't as important as what you're trying to show. So for example, the context, if we turn this down, that way any of our lines and any of our diagram information on top just shows it's more prominent. But then we can still see the context underneath. So it gives the viewer some level of, I guess, base or knowledge of the site.
And they can be shrunk down too. And like, for example, the rock, you don't have to redraw it. I think the rock could be like a circle, right? Like you could show that as a landmark or a node, a point of interest, right? A focal point in the area. So kind of the circle dash would be something appropriate for that area, because think of that is a meeting spot. That is the landmark of the space. So you want to highlight that perhaps as a circle, or some people may even use a star to kind of show that as a huge landmark. Right. So we'll leave those kind of notations to you to share about that. Yeah.
Another thing I was going to suggest as well is since you aren't able to visit the site on YouTube, I found when I was doing my diagrams, there's a lot of really cool videos in terms of people just walking through the site. So you can kind of get creative in terms of finding information as well to kind of bring like a uniqueness to your own diagrams. Because like I said before, the more passive diagrams, they're more straightforward, but in terms of like creating more interesting and active diagrams, you want to bring in different information that kind of makes like it analyzes a site in your own particular way, and it kind of comes to a conclusion. And so just pulling from like Google Earth, like Nadia said, and also YouTube, there's some great videos I found. I can also share them with people if they like, but it's a lot of your own creative, I guess, way of thinking about the site and what you think is like most important to show and convey about the site. So just trying to think of any other tools that would help.
I think those were all good, Abby. I think the dash, the circles, the line thicknesses, you could combine a lot using those 2 or 3 kind of applications. You don't have to know so much. I think just repeating the same kind of, I guess, notation, but in a different way, will give you a lot of them. It will get you a lot.
Yeah, they're like, if you look on the side too, there's a lot of base shapes that you can, for example, like the star, as Nadia mentioned, you can put, for example, like a landmark part or like a point of interest as well.
Maybe can you show text, creating the legend at the bottom? And I think that would conclude then the tutorial.
So to add any text, on the toolbar at the side, you'll have a T or type tool. And you can essentially just drag and drop to see how big you want your text box. We'll label this as legend just because we want to do that. You can also make it bigger and add more text in, or you can create individual text box. So we'll do circulation. So here we've already created our line. So what you can do is bring out your pen tool again. Just make a line here. And what we can do is grab our eyedropper tool, go back to the line we already created, and then here it matches it exactly. So for example, this would be denoted on our legend as circulation, and then you could also make sure whatever you show on your map is also listed here. So if, let's say we had a thicker line for a more heavy, I guess a more busier traffic route, make sure that you list them all so that whoever's reading it, it's clearly noted on both the site and then also in your legend. Yeah, and then also for diagrams, you don't necessarily need a scale because it is more representational versus on your base map where it's actually to scale, you have to, so yeah.
Okay, great. That's wonderful. Thanks, Abby. Maybe if you could stop the recording and I'll make sure I'll put this on CourseLink as well.
For sure.